This is Plant-Based Briefing. A veterinary student receives an F for following her conscience, and a guide to conscientious objection from ourhonor.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson, and this is the curated content plant-based podcast, where I narrate a variety of articles on plant-based, compassionate, and eco-friendly living in about 10 minutes or less every weekday, with permission. Today's article is from ourhonor.org. They're a nonprofit supporting veterinary professionals embracing their conscience. They realize that many animal professionals go into animal-related fields because of their love and compassion for animals. Yet ironically, many of them face bullying and retaliation when voicing ethical concerns. And challenging our systems and institutions is an arduous task. Many of those in power have been ingrained in the old methods and belief systems. And confronting authority can be emotionally exhausting, and without appropriate support systems in place can result in damage to one's mental health, livelihood, and reputation. Their goal is to create an organized network of professionals who are able to formally challenge unethical, institutionalized systems and amplify the voices of those who have been marginalized. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. A veterinary student receives an F for following her conscience, and a guide to conscientious objection from ourhonor.org. A veterinary student receives an F for following her conscience by Stephanie Frazel, DVM. I became a veterinarian to care for sick and injured animals. I had no idea veterinary school would require me to maim my patient in a terminal procedure and then punish me when I refused. In 2018, during my clinical year of vet school at Auburn University, I started my farm animal rotation. It was a mandatory rotation, and I had heard from other students that its name was recently changed from food animal to farm animal, which gave me hope that we would be treating the animals as our patients and not just as products of the agricultural system. During my rotation, I met Fred, a huge black bull with lameness issues. I looked forward every day to seeing him and caring for him at the hospital. Sadly, my school viewed him differently. Fred's quote-unquote owner had relinquished him due to the cost of hospitalization, and the only worth my school placed on him was as a surgical experiment for students. One day they told us to subject Fred to surgery where we could each practice a different procedure. Students were going to remove his eyes, dehorn him, amputate his hooves, and castrate him. After, Fred was to be euthanized. I was horrified and heartbroken and openly refused to participate because I could not do that to him. He was a feeling, living, breathing creature. He was my patient. Did I not have a responsibility to protect him and care for him? Did the veterinary oath mean nothing? I visited Fred alone the night before his quote-unquote surgeries and apologized to him for what they were going to do to him. I felt helpless. I cried and imagined his mutilated body and had a panic attack alone on campus. The next day, I worked on the farm as usual, but I did not participate with the others. I repeated to them that I could not and would not participate in the terminal surgery. They failed me on that rotation and proceeded to begin Fred's terminal surgery. I will forever be haunted by the image of what happened to that sweet bull. For this decision, the faculty later scolded me and threatened me with expulsion, and my peers mocked me. Nevertheless, I graduated in 2019 and have been working as a small animal veterinarian for the last 2 years in a hospital where compassion comes first and where veterinarians advocate for our patients. Looking back on my time in vet school, even after all the hardships I faced, I am thankful that I had the strength to stick to my values and to question the hypocrisies that are unfortunately still so rampant in my field. Some say that integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. I think integrity is also doing the right thing when everyone is watching. It isn't easy or comfortable, and you will face resistance and even hostility, but meaningful change is always accompanied by some degree of upheaval. To anyone out there finding themselves in a similar situation, you are not alone. A guide to conscientious objection. What is conscientious objection? Conscientious objection, or CO, is the refusal to perform a required role or responsibility on the grounds that it conflicts with one's deeply held morals and ethical beliefs. The term was originally used to describe an individual who refused to perform military service, citing freedom of thought, conscience, and/or religion. However, the role of CO transcends a military context and has implications in the medical field. A few examples of CO in the veterinary profession can be refusal to perform terminal surgeries in veterinary school, refusal to perform cosmetic procedures such as declawing and tail docking in your practice if they don't serve any health benefits to your non-human patient, and refusing to perform mass euthanasia of animals who are deemed quote-unquote excess stockpile in the livestock industry. How can you be a conscientious objector at your university? Our Honor aspires to offer a safe place for veterinary professionals and students seeking support and resources to create positive change. If you are ready to mobilize and take action, below are veterinarian and animal advocate Dr. Gwendy Reyes-Ilg's suggestions for conscientious objection. Reach out to us. Tell us your story. We've got your back. You're not alone. A guide to conscientious objection for veterinary students. 1. Research alternatives. Provide the list of published, peer-reviewed alternatives and examples of other veterinary schools that have stopped performing the procedure you are wanting to change at your school, and articulate the benefits of replacing a current practice with the proposed alternatives. 2. Set up meeting with dean and course leadership. Make the case. Remember that it may take time to completely change the curriculum. However, it is a reasonable expectation to be able to learn without violating your sincerely held moral and ethical beliefs. With that in mind, work to create any alternative for yourself and other like-minded students in your class. 3. Plan in advance with course instructor. Schedule meetings as soon as possible to discuss and arrange alternatives that don't defy your conscience. If meetings make you nervous and you don't have the time, Our Honor can represent you. And 4. Stay connected and collaborate. If you are trying to start a program that will continue after you graduate, maintain contact with future students and collaborate with them. Be inspired by stories of conscientious objection. Dr. Stephanie Frazel. Despite being reprimanded by faculty, mocked by classmates, threatened with expulsion, and receiving a failing grade on her clinical rotation, Stephanie Frazel remained unwavering in her ethical values and refused to perform terminal surgeries on a kind, helpless bull named Fred. She encourages current and future veterinarians to stay true to their values and not compromise on their integrity. Dr. Ernie Ward. There was no way that a compassionate veterinarian like Dr. Ernie Ward was going to kill a bird patient who was being used by students for learning surgery. He rescued the bird, who was named Harvey Wallbanger. Dr. Ward has dedicated his entire career advocating for improvements in veterinary medicine as an author, podcaster, television personality, and speaker. Dr. Ingrid Taylor. In veterinary school, Dr. Ingrid Taylor refused to kill ponies used to teach clinical procedures in a terminal lab. She and a fellow student worked together to find happy, adoptive homes for the ponies where they could spend the rest of their lives as valued companions. Dr. Andrew Knight. Dr. Andrew Knight refused to kill animals as part of his training in veterinary school and helped Australia's veterinary schools transition toward humane alternatives. He has since spent his career advocating for animals and is currently a professor of animal welfare and ethics and founding director of the University of Winchester Center for Animal Welfare and adjunct professor in the School of Environment and Science at Griffith University, Queensland. And Dr. Sherston Rosenberg. An aspiring veterinarian, former UC Davis veterinary student Dr. Sherston Rosenberg refused to participate in terminal surgeries, where healthy animals are killed after student surgical training. Instead, she offered to fail the class to save the life of Becky, a dog who was slated to needlessly die for the student's education. Thanks to courageous students like her, UC Davis has now changed their policies and no longer mandates terminal surgeries in its veterinary program. You just listened to A Veterinary Student Receives an F for Following Her Conscience and A Guide to Conscientious Objection, both from ourhonor.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. And that was a tough one to read, especially the story about Fred. That was a tough one to get through. How barbaric. But I am so grateful to people like this who are doing the right thing, standing up for the right thing, helping to make change, and helping others stand up as well. So please share this with anyone who might benefit, and share it just so people know what's going on as well. And thanks for listening.